Hello everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel Psychology Class for All. In this video, we will learn about central tendency and its first measure, the mean. So starting with the concept of central tendency. Imagine we ask 10 people how many hours they sleep every night. The answer will vary. Some will say 4 hours, some will say 6 hours, some may say 9 hours, but we want to get a general idea what is the typical amount of sleep. Here, the typical or average like value is what we call a measure of central tendency. It gives a central point of the data. Central tendency is about finding the middle, typical, or common value in a group of numbers. It helps psychologists to understand what is usual behavior, what do most people do, think, or feel. It is group. Is the group mostly similar or different? So, for example, if we are measuring test anxiety scores of students, then the purpose behind is to know the typical anxiety level in a class. If we are counting hours spent on social media, then the purpose behind is to know how much time an average student spends online. Or if we are studying depression scores, then we want to compare the general level of depression across groups. So, psychologists use central tendency to understand what is normal so that they can better spot what is abnormal or extreme. Central tendency is a way to represent a group of values using one number that best shows what is happening in general. So, central value or central tendency is a single value that represents the center or typical behavior in a set of data. It's a key concept in psychological research. Now about measures of central tendency. There are three main ways a psychologist summarize this kind of information or these kind of information. So these are called the measures of central tendency. Here is the three names with mnemonics and their metaphors. The first one is mean, that is the average. What we usually think of when we say average, the memory trick for mean is the usual or the average score. The second is median, the middle value, like the center seat in a row. The memory trick for this one is the midpoint or center chair. Third is mode, the most common value, what appears the most. So the memory trick for this one is the most popular one. We can understand these measures with another set of examples too. For mean, if five people have different happiness scores, the mean tells us the usual level of their happiness. For median, we can take an example like line up people by their height. The one standing in the middle shows the median height of that group. For mode, we can take an example like if most students prefer listening to music while studying, so the preference is the mode. So to summarize, it can be said that the three measures of central tendency are mean, that is average, median, that is middle point, and the mode, that is most frequent. They help psychologists to understand what is typical in a group. Now we'll learn about the mean. Here is a definition given by Henry Garrett. The mean or arithmetic average is the most commonly used measure of central tendency. It is defined as the sum of all observations divided by the number of observations. Now, how to calculate it with easy examples. Imagine you and four friends have a total of 15 chocolates. If you want to divide them equally among all five of you, how many would each get? So, the total number of chocolate is 15, number of friends are 5, and each will get 15 divided by 5 is equal to 3 chocolates. This equal share is called the mean in statistics. So the mean is the average of a set of numbers. It tells us what is typical or central. We'll take an example of reaction times. Suppose we measured reaction time in seconds for 5 participants as 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here the mean will be 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 and divided by 5. So it will be 25 divided by 5 equal to 5. It will be interpreted as on average the reaction time is 5 seconds. We'll take another example of stress scores. A stress score on a 10-point scale is like participants has got 4, 6, 6, 8 and 10. So the mean will be sum of all these 5 scores as 34 divided by 5 equal to 6.8, and now we'll interpret as the average stress level among these participants is 6.8. So the formula for mean from the raw score or ungrouped data is mean is equal to sum of all values divided by total number of value. So we have learned how to calculate mean from ungrouped data. Sometimes we have too many values to list individually. So we group them into classes or intervals and record how many times each group occurs. This is called group data. We have already learned in last few videos. Now we will learn how to calculate mean from group data. There are two ways to calculate mean from group data. First is called as long method and the second is called as the short method or assumed mean method. So mean calculation with long method and mean calculation with short method. At first we will learn the long method of mean calculation step by step. Let's say we measured daily screen time in hours of students in a psychology class and arranged them in a frequency distribution table having two columns, class interval of scores and the frequency of the students or the number of the students. The formula of mean calculation from long method is mean is equal to summation f midpoint f into midpoint divided f into x divided by n. Here x is the midpoint of the class interval, f is frequency, fx is the product of frequency and midpoint, n is the total number of observation or the students or participants whatsoever. So now In first step, we'll find the midpoint of each class by adding up the upper and lower limit of the class interval and dividing them by 2. So for each class interval, same formula will be followed. For example, here the sum of first class interval is 0 plus 2 equals to 2, and after dividing it with 2, there is a midpoint of 1. Now this midpoint will get multiplied by the frequency of the same class interval. Here it is 1 into 5 is equal to 5 as fx of the first class interval. Likewise, we need to calculate fourth column value for each row. At the end, we have the sum of frequency and midpoint column as 254, and then as a next step, we will apply the long method formula for mean as mean is equal to sum of fx divided by n, then 254 divided by 50 is equal to 5.08 hours. So to interpret this value, it will be said that on average, the psychology students spend 5.08 hours per day on screen. This helps us understanding overall behavior without listing every student's data. The next question can be as how do we use group data mean in psychology? Because it is useful for survey-based research. It helps in understanding behavioral trends, for example, screen time, test scores, or sleep patterns. It is common in quantitative analysis in psychological research. There is another method of calculation of mean from group data, and that is known as short method or assumed mean method. When the data value are large or inconvenient, we use the assumed mean method to simplify calculations. It reduces the workload by avoiding multiplication with large midpoints. For this, the formula is mean is equal to AM plus CI, where M stands for M stands for mean, AM stands for assumed mean, C stands for correction, and the formula for this is summation fx deviation divided by n. Here x deviation is the deviation from assumed mean, and the formula for this is midpoint minus deviation. F stands for frequency and N stands for sum of frequency. Fx deviation is the product of frequency and deviation. I stands for size of the class interval. Let's say we measured anxiety level of a group of students score out of 100. Now we'll calculate the mean from this data with the help of assumed mean method. Now at first we'll start with calculating the midpoint of each class interval in the third column. After that we'll find the assumed mean. Here assumed mean is 55. As the total number of class interval is 5, so the midpoint of third class interval will be taken as assumed mean. Now to calculate deviated x, there is a formula for this. Deviated x is equal to midpoint minus assumed mean divided by the size of class interval. Here, for the first row that has the midpoint as 35 will be subtracted by the assumed mean as 55, and the outcome will be divided by 10 as size of class interval. So the value is 2. Likewise, all the deviated x will be calculated for each row of class interval. The total of this column is total of this column is 0 1 into deviated x is equal to 1. Next column is the product of frequency and deviated x. So now the short method of mean calculation is equal to AM plus CI. Here AM is 55, I is equal to 10. Now calculation of C or correction will be done with the formula as summation fx deviation divided by n, that is 1 divided by 27 is equal to 0.04. Now putting all values as per the formula, mean is equal to AM plus CI, 55 plus 0.04 into 10 is equal to 55 plus 0.04 is equal to 55.4. So the mean result will be interpreted as the average value. The average anxiety score is 55.4 among 100 students. So about the short method or assumed mean method, it can be said that we pick one value as a reference point, the assumed mean, and check how far each group is from it. Then we adjust to get the actual mean. There are some benefits of this method. It is useful when manual calculation is required. It is helpful in small scale research without software tools. It encourages logical thinking and a better understanding of data spread. Now about assumptions of the mean. That means what need to be true for mean to be meaningful. So for interval or ratio scale, the number should be measurable and equally spread. A psychological example for this can be intelligence score, reaction times, in anxiety levels, but not personality types or any categories. For there should not be any extreme outliers for mean calculation. There should not be extreme values that are much higher or lower than others. If one participant scores 2 on a stress and another scores 98, the mean may not reflect the typical level. The third assumption is symmetrical distribution. The data should not be skewed too much. That means if most students score around 60 but one scores around 100, the data is skewed. So these assumptions should be kept in mind while calculating mean. Now is about the strength part of the mean. There are some strength, like it uses all data. So every value is included in the calculation. It is accurate when data is consistent, like measuring group anxiety scores. The next strength of the mean is good for further analysis. It is used in many statistical tests like t-test, ANOVA, regression, etc. Most popular research relies on mean as the foundational statistical tool. It is simple and familiar, like everyone understands the idea of an average, even as a layman, because it is useful in reports, policies, or inventions description. So mean is powerful because it tells us the overall picture, like a summary of mental health in a group. Still, there are some limitations of the mean too. Think of the mean like a balance scale. It works well when everything is evenly distributed. But if someone puts a heavy stone on one side as an outlier, the balance tips and the mean no longer tells the whole truth. So these are the limitations, like it gets affected by outliers. That means one extreme score can make the mean misleading. One very depressed participant can raise the average of depression score. It is not if it is not meaningful for categorical data. You cannot find the mean of non-numeric things Like we can't take the mean of favorite colors or personality types. It may not reflect typical case. If data is skewed, mean doesn't represent most people. If most students sleep 5 to 6 hours, but a few sleeps 10 plus hours, mean might say that 7.5 is an average sleep time, which is misleading. Though this tool has got some limitations, still, mean is useful in psychology as it has got different applications in different areas of psychology, such as in clinical psychology. Average depression score can show treatment effect. Educational psychology, mean test score helps evaluating class performance. In social psychology, mean aggression rating indicates typical group behavior, and in research, central measure to compare groups or conditions. Like the other fields of psychology, mean has got the same application respectively. So that's all about in this video. In the next video, I'll discuss about next measure of central tendency, that is median. So keep watching and don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Thank you.